Welcome back. All right, so Panic Index. I haven't done a Panic Index in a while. I haven't worn this Tampa Bay jersey that I can remember in a while either. So Reverse Retro 2021 Stanley Cup patch right here. Or 2020 Stanley Cup patch right here, sorry. They've won both, so easy to mix up one for the other. All right, so Panic Index, pretty simple, basic, right? Measure of happiness here being the happiest. You got the sunglasses. Somewhat happy here. Somewhat concerned here, full-blown panic down here. On this side is the wake us up when the playoffs start. The Stanley Cup is what really matters. Who cares about the rest of it kind of crowd. And down here is your it's okay, kind of, the dude, kind of the chillness, the it's fine, we're not playing well. So for the teams that are playing really badly down towards the bottom, you'd have them down here. For the teams that aren't playing really bad, but if they miss the playoffs, fans aren't panicking, they'll be at varying distances from the it's okay. The it's okay, the closer they get, the more likely they are to draft pretty high or need that draft pick. So, that being said, let's go ahead and start things off with Vancouver. With the Johnny Canuck logo, which is also the Vachon logo. Very close to the Vachon logo. I'm really surprised that you don't hear more about that. But anyways, so starting off with Vancouver. Vancouver is tough to place on the board. There's no panic. During Travis Green, there was panic. I don't think the Canucks are necessarily up in this area either because they're not in a playoff spot. They don't project to be in the playoffs. But, obviously you can't have them wake us up for the playoffs. I kind of have them down in this quadrant of the board. I would say above the it's okay because they're not likely to draft early, which means they win the draft lottery, because nobody believes they can do it. So maybe this is the year it finally happens, right? And then you start to believe, then they lose the draft lottery, and then you go, it's my fault because I started to believe. So I have Vancouver here on the it's okay part of the board because I don't think there's a great expectation in Vancouver fandom or with the team itself that they're necessarily going to make the playoffs, and I don't think there's a panic if they don't. New York Rangers. The Rangers, I would say, fans, media, team, pretty happy. I'd have them right in here. They've had their setbacks lately. They've had some really good games lately, too. Shesterkin's numbers are still fantastic. There's no reason to have them below the panic line. And so, having them above and right in between the sunglasses emoji and the happy emoji, not the ecstatic emoji, which next time around I'll probably use different ones because it's kind of fun to use different ones. Ottawa. Ottawa's in an interesting position. They're not expected to make the playoffs at this point, obviously. So this season's kind of already seen as a loss. But they're not down in this area either. I don't see them as necessarily being a fan base that's like, okay, just tank it out and try to get that top draft pick. I kind of see Ottawa in the same position as Vancouver. Outside the playoffs currently, yes. No panic about it, I don't think. And just see how the kids do, see how their system works and make the right moves at the deadline. So I don't think there's any panic in Ottawa. Carolina's got to be happy about how things are going. But if they go out in the first round of the playoffs, it'll all be for naught. For Carolina, I have them as wake us up when it's the playoffs. Fans, media, we can enjoy this run, and without D'Angelo for the next month, that's going to hurt their blue line. He's been fantastic, but they have depth on the blue line. They've absorbed these kind of losses before. They were without Teravainen. They did all right without Teravainen. And so, I think Carolina's in a position where it's all about what happens in the playoffs. I don't think the regular season makes a big difference. Whereas for the Rangers, to make the playoffs, if they end up being if they end up having home ice advantage in the first round, be a lot of buzz, even if the Rangers lose in the first round, about the future of the team. So that's kind of the difference between the two. Nashville wasn't supposed to be here, and yet they are. Now, Nashville lost 4 in a row going into that game against Florida. They beat Florida. So I'm going to put Nashville right about here. I don't have Nashville under the wake us up when it's the playoffs category. Not yet. But, Nashville, I would say happy. Not ecstatic, but happy. And, this has been an interesting run for them, an interesting season. They absolutely likely end up in the playoffs unless Dallas goes on a run and Nashville falls out. They have 2 games against one another, including one tonight, which could either help or hinder Nashville's chances. But Yeah, I don't think they're below the line. Washington's a curious one. So they're getting healthy tonight with Oshie coming back, and they're going to have Schultz back in the lineup. Things are pretty good for Washington, but they've also had their share of losses lately. They're 5-5 in their last 10, and while the East looks pretty secure, of the teams in the East that are above that playoff line, Washington's had some issues. And so I'm going to put Washington right on the line, which may seem like I'm hedging, because I sort of am. I think that for Washington, they're right on the line between, fans being happy, and I think the next couple of weeks will make up the minds of the fan base, the media, likely players, management. And the interesting thing is that if Washington, say, goes on a 5 or 6 game winning streak, I don't know that I'd have them here. I think I'd have them over here. Because then it's, okay, cool, now you guys are in the playoffs, you're playing well, and now we think playoffs, what's going to happen there. Montreal, not panicked. I will say that with Montreal, with them cleaning house, I'm going to put them right next to it's okay. Even with the winning streak, which has pulled them up ahead of Arizona, which is remarkable news. Arizona passed them, a month ago? So the fact that they're not last in the NHL is a win at this point for Montreal. But they're still so far below 500, so far below the playoff line, that, there's an it's okay there. And I think for fans, they got to feel like, okay, so it's been a miserable season, but things are coming together. New coach clearly's breathed new life into the team. Now they've won 4 in a row. Now if you add a top prospect from what's supposed to be a very good draft, you're in pretty good shape. So Montreal fans might feel better about themselves tenfold right now than they did, say, a month ago, right, where everything was just falling apart. San Jose, I do think there's got to be some level of panic with San Jose. I don't have them right next to the panic, but close. They've won 1 of their last 10, 2 of their last 11. This is a team that's really going in the wrong direction. And Hurdle's a UFA. There's other players on the team that are aging. There's discussions about the Vlasic contract, how much that costs, how much money they're spending on Burns and Carlson, and whether or not having both makes financial sense, especially with the Vlasic contract. San Jose, I think there's got to be some panic there. So I have them down towards, not at. The at, I think, should be reserved for certain teams. I don't have San Jose at that level yet. You guys can let me know if you feel like for San Jose they should be right next to it, though. Colorado, yeah, we'll put them with Carolina. Colorado, it's about the playoffs. From the start of the season, it was about the playoffs. It is, if they win the President's Trophy, great, cool, that's whatever. But if they don't win in the playoffs, we get back into the President's Trophy curse discussion. We get back into the discussions of the players on Colorado, whether or not they're good enough. There'll be a lot of scrutiny on Nazem Kadri, whether or not he can avoid any kind of penalties / suspensions. And then if he does, but if he doesn't play well in the playoffs, that'll be a whole other discussion after that. So there's a lot of pressure in Colorado. And the question of, do they have a goaltender that could lead them through 4 rounds of playoffs? Is Darcy Kemper the guy? And if he's not, can Pavel Francouz step in and be the guy? And so there's some question marks with Colorado. Buffalo all year. I'm going to have them right down here with Montreal. It's okay. There wasn't big expectations. The one thing with Buffalo, Alex Tuch has looked excellent. Skinner's had a bounce back year. It looks like Middlestad's back and healthy, and he's started producing again. So there are some real good positives with Buffalo. I think that going into next year, they'll need to replace their goaltenders. And they'll need to look at whether or not Luukkonen's going to be one of those top 2, if they're going to look for somebody else. And if Luukkonen's going to be the top 2, do you earmark him as the number 1 or as the number 2? And so it's a matter of who you bring in. So there are some questions, but it feels like Buffalo's in a better position right now than they have been for a long time. That there's some depth there and there's some promise there. And then the one other question mark with young players to me is Rasmus Dahlin. Is he still going to reach that ceiling he was expected to when he was drafted? What's going to happen there? And when they sign Owen Power, how does that change things on the blue line for them? Because you got to think Owen Power will be signing with them this summer, right? And then if he doesn't, that's a whole other discussion. New Jersey. I want to throw New Jersey on this side, but they're not in a position where they're going to expect playoffs. But there's a lot of concern when it comes to Lindy Ruff still being behind the bench. And I would think if you're a Devils fan, watching Montreal win 4 in a row, which didn't happen overnight under Marty St. Louis, but now seeing Montreal playing better, for anybody who wants to see Lindy Ruff gone, probably looking at Montreal and saying, look, they changed coaches and things got better. So I'll put New Jersey with San Jose. Works. Their short form is SJ and NJ, so that works. I think that for New Jersey, again, not full-blown panic, but probably a lot of upset fans that really would like to see something change on the Devils and with how things are being done and some kind of, shift towards making things better next year. So not full-blown panic. Winnipeg. Winnipeg, yeah. Winnipeg's an interesting one in that they're still a couple of games above 500, but I'm definitely putting them below the line because they don't win often enough. They're giving away points. They're giving away leads. There's definitely something wrong there. And when you look at the team on paper, Winnipeg should be much better than what they are. Winnipeg absolutely has the team, the roster, to be up there with the top 3 teams in the Central, right? At the very least, be giving them a run for their money, and they're not. And last night's game against Dallas is another good example of a team that just, there seems to be a fragility with this team right now, and yeah, so I'll go ahead and throw them below the line. Anaheim. I'm going to put Anaheim below the line as well for right now. The West has become a little more competitive with Calgary improving, the Oilers improving. It's left Anaheim in a position now where they're below the playoff line and they've played more games than everybody else. So to me, it leaves them a little bit below the line, but I'm not going to put them down in this area because Anaheim wasn't supposed to be here yet. They're seen as kind of being ahead of the curve. So I'll have Anaheim below the line just a little bit. This is a lot more guys, a lot more teams in this area, a lot fewer teams up here than what I had, say, a couple months ago. Vegas, I think, is optimistic about things. Certainly, they've had their setbacks here and there. I think there's still some concern with goaltending. Leonard, of course, being out for a while now. Can Brossoit be relied on to be a starter in a playoff series? I will see. You never tell with a goaltender come playoff time, right? There have been historic runs before by goaltenders people didn't expect that from. So it's possible that Brossoit frustrates a team through 1 or 2 rounds. But for Vegas, it's really about the Stanley Cup. But I don't have them in this area because they've lost first place in the division. They've definitely had their setbacks. Yes, they get Eichel. Putting Stone on LTIR means they don't have to worry about the cap right now. But having Stone on LTIR is not a benefit to Vegas or to that roster. Stone is one of the best two-way forwards in the National Hockey League. You can make the argument he's the best two-way forward that's a winger in the NHL. Vegas, I don't have them below the line, but they're close to it right now, I think. Arizona, there's no concern in Arizona. They're definitely in the it's okay category down here with Montreal and Buffalo. There's no reason to really get into the whole thing with Arizona too much. It will be interesting to see what they do going into next season, what the plan is. Do you start trying to build up towards a playoff push next year, or do you make a slow improvement? You're going to be in ASU next year. Your ceiling for your attendance is 5,000 people. Do you want to fill that building to 5,000? Do you want to make it loud? Do you want to give them something to cheer for right out of the gate? Or do you take a methodical approach of we want to make sure that we're competitive in time to go to the new building, which might mean a few more years of pain for Arizona. What are they going to do? Philadelphia. You know what? It has to be. Philadelphia has to be. And this is weird because they're not going to make the playoffs. I could put them over here. But the question of what's the plan going forward? So if they trade Giroux, what are you getting back? How do you fix this? And Philadelphia so far, there hasn't been a clear plan to fix this. This was a team that, again, they're good every second year. They're bad every second year. And this year is that second year where they were supposed to be good, and they're awful. So, yeah, Philadelphia, I'm putting them down here because it's been a rough year, and it just seems to keep getting rougher. Chicago, you know what? I'm not going to have Chicago, I don't think, on this side of the board at this point because they're sitting outside the playoffs. There's discussions of how, when they do make that trade for Marc-Andre Fleury, if he decides he wants to get moved. I'm going to put them with Ottawa and Vancouver at this point because they're below 500. They're clearly not going to make the playoffs, and I don't think there's a reason for panic yet. Chicago did change the coach behind the bench, which was a big part of the reason why they were over here early in the season. There's been changes made within the organization. We'll have to grade things next year, but we are into next year territory for Chicago, so I don't see any reason to have them on this side of the board. Seattle. You know what? I'm going to put Seattle here. Not full-blown panic, but there's concern. It's understood this is an expansion team. It's their first year, but this has been really bad. And this has been like a really, really rough run that feels like it's closer to the Atlanta Thrashers or the Ottawa Senators' first year than it is to, say, Tampa Bay's first year. Definitely not in the category of an Anaheim's first year. This is a first-year team that's really struggling. And it started out that you could pinpoint maybe the goaltending or the defense, but it's really started to be the whole team. And, for Seattle, there's got to be concern because you're building that foundation and how you go forward. And if that foundation looks shaky, instead of talking about playoffs in, say, 3 years, which is reasonable for an expansion team, maybe you're talking about playoffs in 6, right? So for Seattle, I think rightfully there is a lot of concern right now in the fandom. Pittsburgh. I don't think there's any concern in Pittsburgh at this point. They're 4-3-3 in their last 10, so it's kind of fallen off a bit for them. But are they in the wake us up for the playoffs category? I kind of think they are. I kind of think for Pittsburgh, and so they're above the line. There's no panic. But I do think that for Pittsburgh, it really is about the playoffs. With the age right now of Crosby, Malkin, Letang, and just with that core being where they're at right now in their careers, it's going to be about what happens in the playoffs, I think, more than their seeding or anything like that. They've lost in the first round, or in the case of 2020, they lost in the qualifying round. They haven't made it out of the first round since 2018. So I really think they're in a position where it's wake us up when we reach the playoffs. Columbus. Columbus right now, I'm going to say that based on their recent run and the fact they're 8-2 in their last 10, they're above 500. I think I can't say they're overperforming. I think they were underperforming before the 8-2 run. But I'm going to go ahead and put them on the line. Sure. I'll put them with Washington. You can find reasons to be mad at Columbus, especially if you think, if they'd made the right moves or if things had been different earlier in the season, maybe they'd be in the hunt for a playoff spot or in a playoff spot. But they're that first team below the line. We all looked at the start of the year and didn't see Columbus necessarily as a playoff team, so I don't see any reason to put them in the panic mode, not at this point. Right on the line for them. Dallas. Dallas is tough because you have to look from day to day. This is a team that can lose against Arizona and beat Colorado in the same week. But, Colorado can lose to Arizona and beat themselves in the same week too. So, this is sort of the way the NHL works. So for Dallas, I'll say in this area here where they're probably pretty happy right now. It's been a good run. I think they've won 8 of their last 11. They're still below the playoff line, but they're trending in the right direction. So for Dallas, it's been a good little run here. It means that they have a better chance of making the playoffs than what they did, say, a month ago. I still don't know that they necessarily get there. I swear, if we get to game 82, and then in game 82, it's a situation where if they win, they're in, and if they lose, they're out. I'm going to be beside myself if they lose the game and they're out of the playoffs, because it won't be the first time that's happened. I don't think it'll be the second time either. But, we'll see how things go for Dallas, but I have them above the line. Detroit. Things are, I think, still pretty good in Detroit. They're obviously not a playoff team right now, but they're not in tank mode either. So I'm going to have them just below the line, into the it's okay quadrant of the board. And I think whatever Detroit does this year, I don't think there's great expectations of, say, a Stanley Cup playoff appearance or anything like that. They're making that progression from year to year. This is a good year for them. And if they finish at 500, that is kind of a win. So if they finish with 82 points, I think fans will take that and they'll be happy. Minnesota. Minnesota depends on the game as well. But I think overall, fans still have to be pretty happy with a season that I think has been more explosive than might have been expected. Kaprizov's been fantastic. Zuccarello, when he's in the lineup, and you always have to be concerned about him missing games here and there, but Zuccarello's been awesome when he's been in the lineup. And honestly, Minnesota has everything you need. The one thing I wonder is, so if the playoffs started today, is Talbot or Kakkonen your starter? And I don't know that it's as clear-cut right now as it would have been if I asked that question before the season started. And I know Talbot played in the All-Star game, but Kakkonen, I think, has been the better goaltender in recent weeks. But yeah, Minnesota, I think, probably pretty happy. There are going to be Minnesota fans that are saying, hey, we've seen this before, and then in the playoffs they lose in the first round, so wake us up in the playoffs. For me, I still think the happiness is ahead of the wake us up in the playoff when it's playoff time. St. Louis, I'm going to put them right here as well under the wake us up for the playoffs. 2019, we're up to 3 years ago now since 2019. This team is going to be itching to go on another run. And so whatever happens from here until playoff time, I don't think is that important. I don't think they're going to necessarily be focused on, being number one or trying to track down Colorado, because I don't think that's all that possible. It's about playing your best hockey at the most important time of the year. And I think they've got the veteran leadership in St. Louis to make that happen. The one question in St. Louis, too, might be, so if the playoffs start tomorrow, is Husso the starter? I think the answer is yes. I think I'm fine with that. But then if Husso had a really rough game one, Bennington's in for game two immediately. So that leash for Husso is probably going to be pretty short, but it'll be interesting to watch. Tampa. Oh, Tampa's, wake us up. Playoffs. Tampa, if they win games right now, it doesn't matter. They finished third in their division last year, and they won the Stanley Cup. So Tampa has no concerns over necessarily finishing first. So when I was listening to the Tampa-Edmonton game last night, and the Sportsnet announcers talking about, well, Tampa, wants to reel in Florida. Ideally, I think they'd like to reel in Florida, but they know they can win on the road if they need to, so I don't think they're overly concerned. So yeah, Tampa Bay definitely for me is wake us up in the playoffs. Florida. I'm torn on Florida. I kind of think I should get two magnets for Florida and put one over here and one over here. But the excitement in Florida over a team putting up what has been a team record for wins over a certain period of time in a season. I think it's 35 and 50 games. It's the first time they've ever done that. It's pretty strong. Now, again, Florida fans, there will be those who are saying, this is great, but we'll see what happens in the playoffs. I don't think we're there right now. I think Florida is really enjoying this run. I don't know how far this could go. I don't know if they get to 125 points or what they do, but it's been an incredible run for them. And they're one of the best teams in the league, according to the standings. Sure, the playoffs may tell a different story, but I don't see Florida as being in this category right now. By playoff time, then yeah. Everybody's in that category come playoff time. New York Islanders. The Islanders, I do sense... I'll put them even with the Jets. I think there's some understandable reasons why the Islanders have underperformed this year. I think the schedule's been really tough for them. I think that the long road trip, the shutdown, everything else that's gone on with the Islanders has been tough. Now they have to play a ton of games in a short period of time. They're not the only team going through that, but they're so far below the playoff line and having to do that, it just makes it tougher. But I do think there's some concern with the Islanders about the way forward. What's the plan? How do you fix this going into next year? So how you fix this going into next year, I think is part of the reason why I'm going to have them in this quadrant of the board rather than moving them over here. I don't have them in that category yet. Oilers. Well, what day is it? Right? The Oilers, though, right now, I'm going to have them right here. And again, there will be those who want them over here. But I think the Oilers are pretty excited. Kane's fit in all right. There haven't been any dramas around this team that we've heard about since his addition or since the coaching change. Coaching change definitely seems to have helped the Oilers overall. Their power play seems to be waking up, and they now look like a really good bet to make the playoffs, whereas, say, a month ago, there was some touch and go there, wasn't there? So the Oilers have clearly had that bounce with the coach. We'll see if they get back to that or what happens, but they're going through the road trip that teams in the West have struggled with all year. So it's not shocking if your team loses against Tampa, Carolina, and Florida. It would not be all that surprising if that happened to Edmonton, and it doesn't mean that they're not a playoff team if that takes place. Toronto. Can I put Toronto anywhere else? Really? See, Toronto, we go through the ebbs and flows every day. Every day, something happens that the Toronto media fans could maybe panic on, right? Like Muzzin going on LTIR. There's always going to be something with Toronto. Jack Campbell, is he going to be, your starting goaltender in the playoffs? Is that enough? Do they need more help in net? There's going to be those concerns, but it really does come down to the playoffs. Because no matter what the record is, no matter how they get there, if they make the playoffs and they lose in the first round, none of the rest of it matters at all. Not a smidge. Not even a little bit. This is all about playoffs, and the rest of it it's just background noise. Boston. Boston I kind of want to put over there too. However, Boston's had a hard time lately. And whenever Marchand's not in the lineup, there are some struggles. They're coming off of their best game of the year against Colorado. But for me, I'm a little bit on the downside with Boston because there are issues with this roster. There are issues with this roster that definitely need fixing. They need to be fixed before the deadline, ideally. At the deadline, I guess. I like moves to be made sooner because I think you're doing a better job of getting ahead of the market. It might be a little cheaper for you to make the moves, and then it's a longer period of time for the player to get adjusted to new surroundings. So for me, I have Boston below the line because I still have questions about their scoring depth. I love Swayman. I have no idea what to expect from him in the playoffs, and I still think they could use another defenseman. So, yeah, for Boston, I have them below the line. LA Kings. Kings have to be pretty satisfied right now with things. The Kings have one of the better records in the league over the last, I think it's 6-8 weeks. And so for the Kings, they're feeling pretty good, and they look like they should be at least a wild card. And if they ended up playing, let's say that they ended up playing Vegas in the first round, that'd be amazing. If they ended up playing Oilers in the first round, awesome. If it ends up being the Kings that were, say, the number two wild card, and they play Colorado, could we see Jonathan Quick go out there and imitate a stone wall yet again and score an upset over Colorado? That would take us all back if the Kings went into the playoffs as severe underdogs and knocked out a favored Colorado team. So, right, it would be very interesting to see what the Kings, with their veterans as well as the kids sprinkled in, what they might be able to do, almost regardless of who they're playing against. But the fact we're talking about the playoffs for the Kings is kind of miraculous considering the picks before the year started where, the three California teams were seen as probably being the three weakest. And last but not least, the Calgary Flames. 10-game winning streak, going for 11 tonight in Vancouver. I think things are pretty happy in Calgary. I would put them over here, but we're on a 10-game heater for them. Everything's, just going so well for them that I think the excitement over this winning streak has got that amped up. And so we're not into the wake us up of the playoffs part yet for Calgary. Soon, maybe. So as you can see, things have spread out a little bit from where from where the panic index was earlier in the year. Where had a lot of teams were very happy. There's a lot of happiness. There wasn't very much panic. And it starts to separate out because the playoffs are a little over 2 months away. And things are settling out nicely. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. Just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.